Welcome to the Green Goddess podcast, where we explore sacred medicines and the evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Tara. Our guest today is my friend Teresa Ulrich, who's here to talk with us about cacao. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy you're here. So tell us about cacao and how is that a sacred medicine?
Ah, I got involved with cacao about 13 years ago. I went to culinary school thinking I wanted to make wedding cakes, and that became very difficult. And I fell in love with chocolate because I could break it up in segments. After working a full week, I could then break up the production of it in parts that I can get it to wineries. I used to pair chocolates with wine. Learned a lot about, vintages of wine and single origin chocolate at the same time. So um, after I finished culinary school, I was honored to be sent to the French Laundry in Napa County. And this is a restaurant that's one of the best restaurants in the world. And it's all very, very tight French military style kitchen. And I would work with the pastry chef on her chocolate days. And in school, we learned to work with white milk or dark chocolate. That was it, budget, cheap chocolate. And at the French Laundry, I learned about single origin chocolate. So working with cacao from Madagascar versus Ecuador versus Venezuela and pairing it properly with herbal infusions. And being in Napa, I was wine tasting, and it just, a light bulb went off. It's like there's so many varieties of grapes here. Terroir is a huge factor. So, how does terroir and variety affect cacao? So that's where I planted a seed in myself that someday I will visit a cacao farm.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, so I paired with lots of wineries, and my husband and I were trying to figure out where to go on a trip. He wanted to go to New Zealand. I wanted to go to like Belize or Costa Rica to go visit a cacao farm. So I ended up negotiating. I discovered that there was cacao in Fiji, which is just north of New Zealand, and connected to the Department of Agriculture, who hooked me up with the head farmer. This was also through an NGO from Sweden that was helping this area of Fiji revitalize their trees from cyclone damage, getting very spindly and not fruiting much. So we split our trip up between New Zealand and then Fiji, showing up in a little town in Tailevu, and um, just taking the risk to be like, well, I hope this family is good to us. And they were super gracious in guiding us into their lives, showing us how they farm, what their challenges are, and just being very grateful to have visitors who cared.
Cool. So why don't you tell us a little bit about cacao as a plant spirit?
As a planet spirit. So when I was there in Fiji, walking through the groves of cacao trees, it has a very soft, feminine energy feeling. It's very cozy to be under the canopy with these trees. And that was the same day I tasted cacao fresh from the pod. So eating it straight from the pod, the beans are a bit bitter and astringent, so you're not going to get any flavor of cocoa at all. And it's covered in a sweet mucilage that tastes a little like mango and lemon. And so after strolling through the trees and eating fresh cacao and then taking a nap, I started having visions. Um,
Really?
mhm. Yeah, very, it's like yeah, just kind of sacred geometry patterns happening and a soft voice urging me on and uplifting me, saying I could help this family, to help this co-op do some work because they were looking to learn how to make chocolate. And at the time, I wasn't, I was very shy, to take on that kind of responsibility. I didn't trust myself to do. But what's interesting is I also work with Huachuma San Pedro medicine. And I did 2 sessions, solo sessions for myself before I went to Fiji, and which helped give me courage to go that direction, just to meet with a brand new family. I didn't know who they were, to travel overseas for the first time. And I feel like the Huachuma also assisted in bringing the visions and to bring me courage to say, you can do this, you can help out. It's not that complicated. Where normally I would over worry, overthink things, or like, oh, this could go wrong or that could go wrong. And at that point, I felt secure and loved and ready to serve.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. So that went on.
So,
Yeah, so that went on for 5 years. That was a 5-year project I worked on with them. That was to teach them how to make chocolate from scratch. So I arranged getting all the equipment that they required to roast the cacao, to crack and winnow the husks away from the cacao, to grind the cacao, and then teaching them how to temper it to mold into bars for selling to tourists. So I would go back every year for 2 weeks to do this work, which was hard because it's so warm there, and tempering chocolate is this form of chemistry where chocolatiers, we don't just melt chocolate and pour them in molds and then pop them out. If we do that, those bars will turn white, and that's the cocoa butter kind of creating and spreading a fatty acid chain, which is still edible. It's just gritty. So let's say a bar you had melted in your car, it reforms, it turns white. That's lost temper. And the process of tempering is forcing the 6 different fatty acid chains of cocoa butter into one really tight family. So they're just cuddling together really tightly. So when you break the bar, it'll snap and have a nice shine, and it retracts from the mold so we can pop it out, which has to be done in a room that's 70 degrees or lower. So we had to get up at like 3, 4 a.m. to take advantage of the cool part of the day to do all that.
interesting. So, can you tell us a little bit about the traditional ceremonial use of cacao?
Traditional ceremonial use. Well, we can go all the way back to the sacrifices of the Mayans and the Aztecs, which is very sad. So there's a goddess. She's a Mayan goddess. Her name is Cacao. Cacao. And she, was of the matriarchal days, and she's originally a fertility goddess. And she watches over workers. She watches over the crops that workers plant. And she loves it when people don't work too hard and get time to tell stories, sit around a campfire and share. So she's just kind of this goddess that represents balance in a sense. And when the patriarchy started taking over, they wanted more sacrifices to the sun god. So the sacrificial people or animals were chosen and treated really well for a year, just adorned and treated like queens and kings, but then had to walk the steps and to have their hearts removed in honor of the sun god. And it was
Wow.
each cacao that they would give them, the sacrificial volunteers, goblets of cacao as they walked up the stairs. And that was cacao, kind of soothing them and sending them love and courage to go through the ritual. And she couldn't take it after so long. She's like, I can't bear to do this anymore. So another goddess, Huitacl, who is like Aphrodite, joined with Cacao and adorned her with euphoria, adorned her with her love, her ability to turn chocolate into an aphrodisiac. So that she then served the kings and the queens, all the rulers, and that calmed their hearts. Eventually, another god was reborn, kind of like a Jesus, born under his God Father, and sacrificed himself to be the final sacrifice to the sun. So the sacrifices stopped, and Cacao has been adorned with her potion of love ever since.
That is beautiful. So tell us about how you use cacao for intentional healing and blessing ceremonies.
Yes, I prepare it very carefully. Not to use dairy in it because that prevents the, amazing heart-opening compounds from entering the system. And I bless it, calling in the goddess Cacao to bring in a big hug, to offer heartwarming soothingness to people that I'll be serving to the next day. So it's calling in her feminine spirit, and I can really feel her come in as I'm stirring the cacao. And I play flute also to soothe any disharmony that's within the cacao from myself or from the whole process. And I also charge it with crystals, so I kind of feel into what the sense of energy might be of the attendees for the next day. So it's being in tune with the spirits out there, the lessons we can learn. And I usually pull 3 different crystals to add and to discuss for the next day ceremony.
Very interesting. And so, what are some of the things that you've experienced in those ceremonies?
Um, I like so many different styles of ceremonies out there. Some are very serious, people do. Some use a lot of spoken word. Mine, I bring playfulness in to just release our inner child and to laugh. And I welcome in people to bring, read poetry, to speak of the wisdom they've learned in their last month. So it becomes a kind of a collaborative ceremony where I'm not the only one hosting. We host each other. We pull medicine cards and we talk about them, and we just have a lovely time. Especially my hikes I do in summer, and I go to the Columbia Gorge. We do a nice nature walk. It's about a mile and has a beautiful cedar grove, and I do a drum journey in there, and also including flute. And we pick blackberries. We climb trees, and we put our feet in the water. And it's just a nice, slow day that we give ourselves permission to do. Because right now, Cacao is for the working people. And her saying is no more work without rest, no more work without time for family and friends, and time for music and dance. And above all, no more work without love. So that's when she's felt the most.
I love that. Isn't that true? Yeah.
That's why I feel like the tree is reaching out right now. She sees how we are overworked. We're losing our spirits.
Yes.
What a beautiful spirit to tell us to slow down, to open our hearts, to say
Mm,
you deserve that time. Stop pushing yourself.
yes. I love that. I love that. It's so important, right? Because when we serve, especially as healers and teachers and priestesses, when we serve, if we serve and we don't have enough joy within us, we're not serving at the highest vibration.
Right? Exactly. Yeah, and I love seeing people, their faces light up, and we just giggle. And when I do my nature walks, I make, not just sipping chocolate. I made some coconut cacao popsicles, but I don't use cane sugar in for these events because I don't want it to overwhelm the cacao. I like monk fruit, stevia, coconut nectar, and yeah, this last hike I made 5 different treats like chocolate dipped strawberries, and I made a bonbon that had some mesquite powder in it, ginger, some cayenne, just a super nutritious hearty bonbon, and a goji bonbon.
Awesome.
Mm.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. So how many people do you usually have at your ceremonies?
I have about 8 people.
And do you find them transformational?
I do. I mean, even my husband came along once and he's like, that was my favorite day of the year. Just sitting, connecting, strolling. And again, we turn into like 11, 12-year-olds when we go out there. And that's what we need more of. You know, tired of adults being adults. Just let yourself be a kid again. Why do you forget? And these experiences help them remember their inner child and how much that inner child wants to share.
Yes. So what do you think is the difference between chocolate and cacao as far as the spirit properties, if
Mm.
there are any?
Well, cacao, the best part of cacao is eating it fresh from the pod. So that's the superfood you hear about or written in articles. It's like it's so good for you, so much more than blueberries, and but you have to eat it fresh from the pod, which we don't have much access to. Except I do ship them in from Ecuador once in a while. And then the next best superfood is the nibs. So those are the beans that have been roasted and cracked and winnowed with the husk blown away, and that you can put in your smoothies. You know, people put them in cookies, and that's the next best thing to eating it fresh out of the pod. But yeah, it has a lot of health benefits. Pull up here. Yeah, 40 times the antioxidants of blueberries. It's the highest plant-based source of iron, full of magnesium for a healthy heart and brain. Has a lot of calcium too. It's a natural mood elevator and antidepressant. Um, and what that means is it's funny how women can really get in tune with chocolate, say, in premenstrual cycle. I'm not
Right.
sure exactly what it does to the hormones. It's doing something. But it's also when we tend to get a little depressed at that time. It's a natural antidepressant. And the compound that causes that is called anandamide. And that's also known as the bliss molecule. And that's what gives us a sense of feeling like we're falling in love. And
Yes.
that's what I look for in a bean for ceremonial cacao. Because not all cacao is like that. It may have a hint of it, but I seek beans to work with my ceremonial cacao that has more anandamide. And cacao beans can be purple to white. Criollo is a whiter bean. Trinitario is kind of a more purplish brownish bean, and then Forastero is purple bean. And the purple ones have more antioxidants, but the white ones have more anandamide. So I found a Peruvian bean that I work with that has that extra anandamide. That feels
Hmm.
like your heart is just opening and you're falling in love, and you love it falling in love with yourself. You're going, why was I so stressed out about myself earlier? And it's not like you can eat so much Hershey's and just be amped on sugar and be caffeinated up, theobromined up, and good ceremonial cacao will keep you calm. It will not throw you into that place.
It doesn't have sugar in it, right?
Yeah, yeah. When I make my ceremonial cacao, I use like coconut sugars and monk fruit and stevia for sure. I don't
Mhm.
like to add cane sugar. I still do, 'cause I've been professionally working with chocolate for 12 years. I've of course made confections that are very traditional, like salted caramels. But I also have a line of chocolates that are unsweetened that I keep trying to improve on. So I want it to have a rounded sweetness. It's not as sweet as cane sugar, but it's satisfying, and it's not just one sugar. It's kind of like, why would I add NutraSweet only to chocolate, right? So I find the benefits of what stevia tastes like, monk fruit, and coconut sugar tastes like, and create a ratio between those to still make them taste good, but not overly strong, like stevia might become too bitter.
Mhm. And you do all kinds of cacao work. I mean, you do cannabis infused cacao as well, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, I did a lot of work
Chocolate.
with
Yeah.
cannabis. I didn't get to make the chocolate from scratch like I normally do, but I got to work with woodblock chocolate here in Portland is very popular. And so yeah, Charlie, who owns the business, would deliver blocks of chocolate. I melt it down. Then I infuse the cannabis oils in with cocoa butter and slowly add it to the chocolate to mix overnight. And what's great about the oils we used were that the terpenes were separated and removed. There's still a hint of cannabis flavor, but if all the cannabis flavor was in there, it would have overwhelmed the delicate nuances of single origin chocolate. Expensive bean to bar chocolate. So, and you can barely taste it actually in the chocolate. So I think we're the first to have done that with chocolate, because most edible makers, they don't separate the terpenes out. They use crappy chocolate and it doesn't taste good. It gets you high, but we want an experience, a low dose experience too.
Yes. So, what other medicines does cacao get paired with?
It's a sister medicine to peyote. So
Really?
it really is. Yeah, that's why I like to bring it to peyote ceremonies. It's just a sister spirit, so it works well. I still need to find out. I have to talk to a friend and find out the history on that. But ever since I heard that, I started to bring cacao to peyote ceremonies because it helps people when they show up who are new to not feel so nervous about being with a new crowd, and it calms them down, opens their hearts, and then at the very end of the ceremony, when there's this residual vulnerability, it helps revive them and bring in self-love until they're ready to go home.
Hmm. I like that. And in what way is it similar to peyote?
I don't know how it's similar to peyote. I just know that it's an ally.
Oh, okay. Like they're
So
friends.
I don't think it's like related in the plant world. It's that I have to ask our friend Linda about. It's like why is that? Who found that out?
Yeah, it's really kind of fascinating to consider like the plants as having their own sort of personalities and wanting to connect with one another or not, not liking each other potentially as well.
Hmm.
Um, it's kind of hard to imagine because plants are loving in general, but you hear about that. You hear about certain plants when we talk about shamanism, being demanding of how their students, the plants are the gurus really. And so it's about some of them are demanding about how their students need to prepare for them to show up
Yeah,
and what plants that they can't mix.
right. It's important for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting how they have sort of different personalities. And it's interesting how you shared that cacao has like different deities or goddesses that are associated with it.
Yeah,
So it's not even just the cacao spirit itself, it's other spirits in the cacao.
right. And it's also a tree of life, in South America. So connecting the underworld to the heavens. In the middle plane is the trunk. So it's very revered.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really interesting how it's got just so many different qualities and aspects. So, what do you think people misunderstand about cacao, if anything?
That they don't know it's fermented. I meet so many
Oh, I
people who
didn't know
had
that.
no idea that it's fermented. So, it takes about 6 months for the flower to turn into a pod. Little tiny little midge flies pollinate them because the flowers are so tiny, they're the only little insects that can get inside to pollinate them. And once pollinated, then 6 months later, you get a pod. The pods are cracked and poured into a pile. That's when the wild yeasts from the environment start to eat away at the sugars on the outside, this mucilage. And so that follows a process of anaerobic fermentation, going and then opening up the bean from the inside, aerobic fermentation, and all these proteins and sugars, enzymes go to work to create the precursors to cocoa flavor. So if you're eating it fresh out of the pod, it tastes nothing like cacao. It tastes bitter. It's a bit astringent. And when I went down my second time to go to Fiji to study fermentation, the process, it was about the fourth day that after doing a cut test, that I noticed cacao flavor developing. So, like the first 2 days, it sits in a pile, Then they cover them with banana or taro leaves. Then they turn the pile to distribute the heat evenly and pray that the heat goes up again. And they do this again the next day, turning it just to distribute the heat. And it was about the fourth day cut test that I noticed a flavor of cacao. And it reminded me of Malbec wine, which is a wine that has kind of natural chocolatey notes to it. And then on the sixth day cut test, the bean was just completely obliterated inside. So the enzymes have all done all their work. It's a nice brown with a hint of purple, and then it's dried for up to a week on some drying tables, but it's still fermenting in that time. So flavor development is still happening. And they have to dry out till about their 4% moisture throughout the whole, about 50 pounds, only 4% moisture, because then it's packed onto ships, into cargo containers, and they have to be packed loosely because they're still releasing moisture. If they're totally packed up without any air holes, it'll show up rancid, acidic, smell like cheese. So the wrong acids will start coming forward. And I had that happen to me, unfortunately, when the Fijians, they overwrapped their beans. And I was so psyched about this batch coming, and it would just smell footy. I'm like, oh, so I had to teach them a lot about logistics and how to pack properly.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's
You really know your stuff.
Yeah, even chemists, they don't really know what the heck's going on. They're still learning about it. And that's the toughest part on the farm is fermentation and making it consistent because in Fiji, it's extra cold there. Hawaii is also extra cold. Hawaii is the North Pole of cacao. Fiji's the South Pole of cacao. So they have issues where like a storm might come in for a month and they can't get the temperature of the beans up properly. So they need to have volunteers come build fermentation houses, collect all the pods, ferment it all in one place, and have it all managed in one place. The beans I got from Fiji, it's like each family farm was fermenting it differently. So there was a huge, huge range of variety. But our future must be, controlled fermentation. And it's amazing that we have as much chocolate as we do, considering how much can go wrong.
Mm, yes.
Yeah, it takes.
So,
So yeah, so an average fine flavor cacao tree grows 20 to 40 pods, and that's annually, and that makes 2 pounds of unsweetened chocolate per year. So we need quite a lot of trees.
mm, yes. And so, do you have a website that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I'm chichocolate.com, CHI chocolate.com. And I also have my email. It's Teresa, Teresa, at chichocolate.com. I have a cacao ceremony coming up in January or February. So if you are interested, please email me.
Okay. Awesome. Is there anything else you want to add about cacao?
How about, I'd say I wish everybody would buy 3 bars from different origins. So you can get in Ecuador, Madagascar, Venezuelan, whatever 3 different countries you can buy single origin bars from and do a side by side tasting. And it'll blow your mind how different cacao is. And they come from a tree. They're all very different and their terroir affects them. So just have fun with that. There's a brand called Pralu, Pralus. I think they're at Whole Foods, and they have 9 different single origin bars you can buy in a tasting stack that I recommend.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Teresa, it's been really interesting having you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing the teachings of cacao.
Happy to. Thank you.
And as I say at the end of every episode, may the plants be with you.